Welcome to Net Retention TV. I'm Nick Mehta, CEO of Gainsight, and I'm super excited to start an ongoing conversation around how the most important metric in customer success has shifted from churn to net retention. And we're going to be interviewing people that we admire and have learned from in this aspiration for all of us to up our game in this as we enter this new phase of the economy and new phase of customer success. So today, I couldn't be more excited to welcome our first guest to this new series, Dave Kellogg. I think I can say, and Dave, this might embarrass you, Dave, you are kind of my SaaS soulmate, and I'll explain. So Dave and I have an eerie connection together. So number one, Dave definitely geeks out about customer success. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that a lot. We'll talk a lot about that. Number two, in case you don't know the crazy story of Gainsight, Gainsight was started partially out of some folks that spun out of Dave's last company that he ran, Host Analytics. Number three, Dave was an early advisor to Gainsight, so we really appreciate all the help you provide. Number four, he talks about customer success and net retention, as we'll talk about a lot on his blog, Kellblog. And if you don't know Dave, Dave's he's become a little mini legend in SaaS. He was an executive at SAP through Business Objects, one of their acquisitions. He was an executive at Salesforce. He was a CEO of a software company called MarkLogic. He was a CEO of an early SaaS company called Host Analytics, I think now called Planful. And now he's an active investor, advisor, and board member of number of SaaS companies. But the way you probably know Dave, if you follow anything on the internet, is he has an awesome blog called Kellblog. We're going to talk more about Kellblog, but he has tons of insights about running a cloud business. I read it all the time, and he's talked a lot about customer success. So welcome, Dave.
Great to be here, Nick, and thanks. The other thing we have in common, I think we were both, were you at the famous Sequoia Stuck Pig meeting?
Yes.
We were
That's
both Sequoia
right.
CEOs back in the day.
Sequoia CEOs, yeah. And then the other one we have, by the way, which I forgot about, is Dave and I both have a strange penchant for parody music videos about tech. So that's not going to be the main topic of conversation today, but there is some backstory there. But we have to collaborate on a video at some point.
Yeah, that would be fun.
That's our next venture. But for now, we want to talk about net retention. But just so the audience gets to know you as a human being, because we always like to bring the human first concept to everything we do. Dave, I'd love to ask you, as a human being, what is your favorite TV binge during COVID?
During COVID, Queen's Gambit. Unfortunately, there's only one season, so I'm waiting for more, but I really love that.
That's awesome. Queen's Gambit is, I think, one of the fan favorites. And actually, if you join us for a Pulse event in June, you'll see that we'll have some fun homages to Queen's Gambit amongst other streaming TV. So that'll be fun. We'll see the audience there. For now, what we want to do is talk about this idea of net retention. And what really got this on the radar for me, Dave, was two different things I saw from you. Number one, I saw you do a SaaStr talk, I think probably a year ago, I think it was called Churn is Dead, Long Live Net Retention.
Yep.
Something like that, right? And then I also saw you do predictions for 2021 about, basically how net retention is going to be a big focus for SaaS companies going forward. So just to ground everyone, before we got to net retention, why were you so early in thinking about customer success and churn? Because you've been talking about long before a lot of other people.
So I think, I'm a math guy in my bones, and I think the answer is real simple. I'm just going to give you an equation. Churn times CAC equals the actual dollar cost of churn, right? And the day I realized that, I went, wait a minute, if we churn to $2 million and it costs us, our CAC ratio is 1.7, I just spent $3.4 million. I'm going to have to spend $3.4 million to find new ARR to fill the leakage. And I think that's the most visceral way, because sometimes these rates, they sterilize the numbers. Oh, well, 92% is okay, or 8% is okay. And sometimes I just like dollars. And you just go, wait a minute, we churned $2 million. Our CAC is 1.7. We're going to spend $3.4 million on sales and marketing to backfill that. What if we spent some fraction of that $3.4 million and not losing them in the first place? Right, and that was kind of the aha moment for me that made me a zealot.
I love that. A couple of things I want to click on there. So for people that don't know, CAC is customer acquisition cost. So just define CAC for people. What is that metric?
Sure. It's in plain English, it's how much we spend to acquire $1 of new ARR. And it's typically calculated by last quarter's sales and marketing expense divided by this quarter's new ARR. So, but in English, how much does it cost me to buy $1 of ARR? That's what SaaS companies do, right? We buy ARR.
And I love that because, I totally agree with you. The percentage really does sterilize it and depersonalize it. And I think you've done two things. You've converted it to dollars. So how many dollars am I churning? But then you've actually multiplied it times the CAC to say, what would it cost to replace that? And in a lot of companies, the CAC is more than one. And so the issue I think you're saying is it's actually more than the churn dollars. You're actually losing all that money that's going to cost you to get more. And I don't know if you feel the same way, Dave. It's not always clear that you can get those additional dollars because eventually you run out of customers to acquire. So at some point, you may have lost your last dollars of customers that you could go get. So it may not even be as simple as replacing them. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, most of my tech background before CEOdom was in marketing, and the marketing guy in me is all about word of mouth. I mean, that math doesn't even consider the word of mouth damage done by the cost of churn customers. So I agree with you. By the way, word of mouth is a huge, at least in tech, it's a huge buying factor. And by the way, in most communities, people ask their friends how they're solving problems. And yeah, each one of those dollars that leaks out probably goes along with a person who's maybe not going to say nice things about you when their friends call.
100%. So, and that's kind of 101 customer success, but it's always worth repeating. In fact, that's funny. An hour before this conversation, kind of connecting the small world that you and I are connected to, I was talking to the head of customer success at get this, a CPM software company. The old space Dave used to be in corporate performance management. And he was saying, this is one of the younger companies, and he was saying their goal is 100% customer success. He's like, they want to get to the point where when a customer asks for a reference, they just give the customer their customer list and say, call any of them. And that's kind of, it's funny, you were a Sequoia CEO. So I remember meeting Doug Leone, who's a legendary investor from Sequoia, one of the all-time great investors, billionaire, couldn't be more successful. And I remember naively, like they were talking to me about some CEO job and he was on the board and I asked him, I said, can I get any references on working with you? And he said, call anyone. And I was like, okay. And he's like, that's kind of what you want in customer success is you want call anyone, right? And that's kind of, that's the big picture. But when we talk about measuring it, the early days were certainly about churn and churn dollars and churn percentage. And then you started talking about net retention. So tell us a little bit about what went through your head when you came up with that kind of SaaStr presentation.
Sure. I mean, I think the problem with churn is, and with a lot of SaaS metrics, is that people can kind of game them or define them selectively. I think for me, maybe one of the light bulb moments was I was working with a banker on a financial deck, and he was calculating a lifetime value, right? So he was inverting the churn rate. So if you have if you have a 90% retention rate, a 10% churn rate, we'd say you have a 10-year lifetime value. And I'm watching him type in the spreadsheet, and he basically does a max of 10, 1 over the churn rate. And I'm like, what are you doing there? Like it just struck me as like wrong. Like that's not how you're supposed to, what are you doing? He's like, well, the lifetime won't be credible if it's more than 8 years or more than 10 years. So I'm going to put an arbitrary cap on it in the middle of this financial model. I'm like, whoa, arbitrary caps, like problem. So that was, one of the moments. There were two different moments. That was one where I'm like, wait a minute, if we're arbitrarily capping this thing, and by the way, the underlying point isn't crazy. For a 3-year-old company to say they have a 10-year customer mean lifetime, right?
That is kind of questionable.
Inherently questionable, good word. But the other problem was just how people calculated churn, right? I ended up, because people look at churn rates, right? So if a lifetime value is 1 over the churn rate, then the question is, well, what's the churn rate? Yeah. Not lifetime value, but lifetime length. Sorry, I always make a mistake. If the customer lifetime is 1 over the churn rate, what is the churn rate? And basically, I realized there were 4 different ways to calculate churn rates, right? You could either calculate it based on available to renew, or you could calculate it based on the entire ARR base. Right. And
just to click into that one, that difference is basically whether you have a 1-year contracts where everyone's renewing every year, in which case those metrics are the same, or you have multi-year where in a given year, the available to renew might be half the base or a third of the base, right? Is that right?
Exactly right. In companies that do multi-year deals, the entire base is not up for renewal every year.
Right.
In the old school SaaS model of everyone's annual, then everyone is up for renewal. So there's no difference between ATR available to renew and the ARR base. But for many good reasons, multi-year deals are more and more popular. So only a fraction of the base is up. And what a great way to game it. Oh, our churn was 10%. We're super happy. Oh, it's actually 20% of the people who had a chance to renew, but only half had a chance to renew. Right? That's a world of difference.
Just as a side note, I remember talking to a company who was like, yeah, the good news is our churn rate is 1% a year. The bad news is we have 3-year contracts and we started selling 2.5 years ago. So it's like, nobody has come up for renewal yet. So
exactly right. Exactly right. So there's a big difference between ATR and ARR. And if you're doing 2-year deals on average, it's a 2x factor, right? And some people do 3-year deals. So these are not small perturbations. So basically we're building kind of a castle on a sand foundation, because if the foundation is based on this number called churn rate, well, it's now gameable by a factor of 2 or 3 based on ATR versus ARR. And then the other problem is, are you calculating it before or after expansion, right? Because sometimes people go, our churn rate's only 3%. And it's like, it's 15% gross and 12% expansion. So it's 3% shrinkage. But whoa, your gross churn is 15%, which is actually, it's okay in my mind. But like, it just gets misrepresented. Then you invert 3% and you get 33-year lifetime, and then the spreadsheet kicks in and caps it at 10, so you can't see the problem. So I just looked at all this and just go, we're counting angels on pinheads, right? It's not meaningful.
I love that. That's great. So then you're saying that net retention could be a little bit more apples to apples comparison. So let's try to help people understand, first of all, what the calculation of net retention is from a Kellogg approved best practice calculation. How do you do net retention?
Sure. So you basically take everyone who was a customer a year ago, right? So we go back. If by the way, you can do a 1-year retention rate or a 2-year or a 3-year, right? But let's just do a 1-year net dollar retention rate. We basically say whoever was a customer a year ago, add up all their ARR. Let's call that 100 units, and then we look at that cohort. What are they today? And just say that cohort is 100, and then all in, right? Net of everything, expansions, incidental upsell, total churn, downsell, product substitution, net of everything. What is that cohort worth today? If it's worth 110, then that would be a 110% net dollar retention rate. And say it was worth 90, then it would be a 90% net dollar retention rate. So that's how you calculate it. Are you going to ask me about survivor bias? Ask me about survivor bias, Nick.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna first ask you: Is it okay if you don't count churn if it happens on a Friday? Is that true or no? Is that not true?
Friday churn is excluded. Yeah.
Friday. That's right. Just to make sure we were all good, because we want to have a good weekend, so you can't count churn if it happens on Friday.
And
but joking aside,
we don't like as well. That's another commonly excluded.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't us, it was them.
Yeah.
But seriously, survivorship bias is where I was going to go, because I think that's a very interesting. I also love nerdy math concepts. So tell us what survivorship bias is in general, and then how it applies to this area.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I ever heard about survivorship bias was actually in mutual funds. And if you saw mutual funds doing their ads, they'd say, look at our 5-year performance, look at our 10-year performance on these funds. And the reality was they were starting 10 funds, shutting down the bad ones.
Right.
So only the good ones were still in business, and they would market the returns of the good ones, right? Survivor bias, we're only talking about the ones that survived, and we shut down the rest. When it comes to churn survivor bias, it's pretty simple. There's really 2 different ways to calculate net dollar retention. One is the way I did it with you a minute ago. We go back a year, grab a cohort, see their value, and then we look at them today. Some people do survivor bias, where they say, let's look at the people who are customers today and then go back and look at what they were worth a year ago. So i.e. they're only counting the survivors because they're starting with the group that survived and then going backwards. And that basically says in English, excluding the people who no longer chose to do business with us, comma, our net dollar retention rate is blah. And and by the way, some public companies do this. I have found, the real SaaS nerds, I had a drink with an EPM CEO. It was quite some time ago after an S1 came out. And we sat down in the bar at the Rosewood. And the first thing he said to me was, do you see the survivor bias, the retention rate?
Oh my gosh. And it's so funny because I think that breaks the whole concept of net retention, because at a fundamental level, the idea of net retention is, okay, I have $1, and if I don't get any new customers, that dollar turning into $1.20 or $1.30 or 90 cents or whatever. But if you do it backwards looking, it's the math won't apply going forward then, right? It won't actually be a useful metric. And so it sounds like it's just a good way to game the system.
It absolutely is gaming. I don't think it's a valid metric at all. The thing you reminded me of, it's slightly an aside, but I know you're a math geek too. The very first time I looked at churn, I looked at it as a decay function, right? Because I was like, oh, you're going to basically gross churn. You're going to lose. So I always used it as a discount rate on a net present value calculation. Because look, we're taught in business school how 100%. To evaluate an annuity. And that's the way I looked at it. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, it could be bigger than one, right? And which takes me back to the key word of SaaS, which is it's the annuity stupid, right? Remember it's the economy stupid line from whatever election that was? Well, that's why SaaS companies are worth money. It's the annuity. And this is all about trying to figure out how to value that annuity.
Well, on that note, so what is, let's talk about both gross and net. You invest in companies now, you advise them. What is kind of good, better, and best in a gross retention these days, and also a net retention?
Yeah, and I'm going to disclaim my benchmarks a little bit here, because I don't feel like I'm as tied on the benchmarks as I used to be. I'll just tell you my numbers that I still use. I don't know if they're accurate, so I'd love to hear from you in the crowd. But I would say gross retention of anything less than 10 is great. I would say 10 to 15 is normal. I would say above 15, I start to get itchy and go, wait a minute, why is it above 15? On net, I think, and look, one of my favorite comps databases is the Meritech Capital Public Comps. I don't know if you go to that site.
Yeah, but they're on their website, right? Yeah,
they're on their website. Yeah. They have great retention rates. I won't look at it now and get distracted. But because those are public companies, there's a certain survivor bias in their metrics, right? You're looking at best in class. And for them, I think it's like 120 is a good rate. But that's really like amongst the people who went to the best school and had the best results, the average SAT was blah, right? So I think it's too biased high, but they would say 120, I think, right? Public company investors. I think for a typical growth SaaS company, a net rate of 105 to 110 is good. Anything above 120 is epic. Above 130 is like super epic.
Yeah, and I think your point's such a good one, by the way. It's a lot like saying, what's the average height of a basketball player and only looking at people in the NBA? And then it's, obviously you bias the sample. But on the flip side, a lot of people aspire to play in the NBA and a lot of people aspire to be public companies. So there's actually two ways to look at this data set. I see it the same way you do, which is when I look at the public comps, I come away thinking, wow, to be, almost everyone's above 120, 130. But, there's that, those are the outliers. And I also think, I don't know if you feel the same way, that net retention is quite different based on your pricing and business model. So with companies like Twilio that have usage-based pricing, they actually can get to, Twilio's had 180% quarters, which just makes it's just incredible, right? Like you don't have to add any customers and you grow 80%. But a lot of enterprise companies, I think like the ones you and I have run, might be running 110, 120, and that's quite good, even though that doesn't look good compared to a Twilio. I don't know, how do you think about that?
Yeah, look, so I wear multiple hats, and one is I typically advocate for founders. Like I'm an independent board member trying to help the founders with very demanding VC parents, and that's why I say, hey, wait a minute, you're comparing us to the basketball league here,
right?
And 110 isn't bad for where we are. We're a lot smaller. We don't have the install base side. 110 is good in my mind if you're a typical growth phase. But yeah, we should be shooting. I agree with you. Like we should be aspirational. This is not height. This is not something that was kind of predetermined. This is something we can't control, and we should shoot for 120, 130. I actually, and then the question is, how do you get there? And I think there's two ways you get there. One is usage-based pricing, which by the way, if you have good contracts, it's kind of a ratchet, right? It only goes up, but usage can go down. We need contracts that think about that. And the other is just bake it in. More and more companies I'm working with are doing 3-year deals with baked-in expansion, and they're actually willing to trade off some of the year one to get the expansion. It's a little bit of game theory, but if this is how we're going to be measured, we shouldn't be surprised that managers are optimizing for it.
That's a good point. And so that contract might look like $100,000 in year one, $150 in year two, $200 in year three, but it's all pre-contracted. That's what you're saying?
Basically, yeah. So it's that notion of built-in expansion, but I don't need usage to get it. I've got it because of the way we structure the deal, usually based on anticipated adoption. Usually that's why you're ratcheting it. But yeah.
So you see companies in your new role in lots of different phases of the life cycle. You probably meet some very early stage startups. You're on the board of some growth stage companies. You're friends with lots of people running public companies. I know at some points in a company's life cycle, figuring out churn, like growth churn, is important because they might just have a leaky bucket and people are leaving them and there's issues with the product or whatever. And at some point, switching to net retention makes a lot of sense because you want to double down on your best customers. You want to grow your overall business. When is the point at which somebody should shift from a focus on gross churn to net retention?
So I actually think it's pretty early. Because here's the problem. Let's just talk about the problem with gross churn.
Yep.
It encourages customer success to play hockey like a goalie, right?
Yes.
Like all I can do is make a mistake. Goalies never score in hockey. Never. I think I've maybe seen it once.
Yeah, right. Right. It's very rare.
Yeah, you have no opportunity to score a goal in hockey. All you can do is let a goal in. And when customer success departments run in hockey goalie mode, I think you get some dysfunctional behavior, right? Because they're saying, all I can do is make a mistake and I don't want to let any goals in, therefore save every customer, even if maybe they shouldn't be saved, right?
Right.
And so I would agree with you. The industry kind of progressed from looking at like minimizing gross churn. And as an industry history, you're correct. We used to focus on minimizing gross churn, and now we're focused on net dollar expansion or retention. I would argue for any given company today, I would skip step one. I mean, I might advance directly to step two and just say, hey, let's focus on net dollar retention now, because really I want my customer success department driving towards optimizing the value of the install base and not towards minimizing mistakes. So basically the baseball cliche, are we counting runs or counting strikeouts, right? And let's count runs.
I like that a lot. And it's interesting because I think it sets up well for the next question, which is, in some cases in that company where there's a ton of churn and there's a lot of issues, it might not be that the customer success team is the one that should be focused on those customers. It might be there's a product issue or a go-to-market issue or go-to-market issue or whatever. So how do you divide up ownership of net retention? How do you think about what products are responsible for, sales, customer success, et cetera?
So this one's a long one, and I think I'll do the short version, and you have a lot more expertise in this one than I do, so I'd love to hear from you. Of all the models I've heard of, the one I like best is where a customer success manager owns a cohort of customers, and their job is to make that cohort grow. Yep. And I think it gives you the right incentives, because they can say this one's not worth saving. They can say this one's worth expanding. I also like a model where they are collaborative with sales, and they could say this one's got a new opportunity that I need to put a salesperson on because I think I'm pretty good, but this is a sales opportunity. This is a full bake-off. It's a multi-vendor evaluation. I don't do that kind of upsell. I do the hunting in a zoo kind of upsell. But that's the model I like. It's collaborative with sales when it comes to expansion. Like, I don't care who does the paper. So therefore, and neither do they. So the work will drift to the person best to do it. And that's the sales collaboration model I like. And then the overall model is I own a little cohort, and my job is to make that cohort was worth 100 last year, worth 120 this year.
I love that. I think that it's not common yet what you're describing. And I think we have a lot more CS teams that are the hockey goalie right now, right? And I think that's not where we want to be. That's why we're talking about this. But I like what you're doing. And I think actually a lot of people are doing these pods. We have the sales team and the CS team, and they're jointly both having similar patches of customers, and you're aligned together. I also love the idea of the CS team helping to say, when am I going to pull in sales, versus where a lot of companies, it's the opposite. The sales team is kind of pulling CS in. And I think that getting CS to be more proactive, and frankly, one thing we talked about in the previous event was being more willing to own a number. And that's something you talked about as advice to CS leaders. Can you maybe repeat some of that advice about owning a number?
Sure. I mean, I think CS people sometimes forget, like I'll tell you the story. It's not a long one. When I was at Salesforce, right, I grew up in enterprise software. It's a very sales-focused business, right? Everything sales. And I was at Salesforce, and we were a $3 billion company at the time. And I realized that Maria Martinez, who ran customer success, had a $2 billion number, and Frank Van Veenendaal, who ran sales, had a $1 billion number. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if your number is an importance of, kind of importance or weight around the executive table, customer success is, in any maturing SaaS company, this will be true, right? The CS person has a massive number. So, and I think CS sometimes punches below their weight class. Like, hey, you got a $2 billion number. Why don't we act like it? Because like a lot of CS people are very nice people. They grew up in supporting roles. They're like, no, you're the heavyweight now. Like, your number is $2 billion. The other guy's number is $1 billion. The other person's number is $1 billion. So, so that was the sense there. It's like, let's just think about how big your number is.
I love that, and I think that's great advice for anyone watching. If you're in CS, I think that CS needs to move to a world where we all are accountable for results. And that's not bad. That's good. And that can be good for customers too, because you're driving things that hopefully are helping them as well. So one of the things that came up in that conversation naturally when we talk about ownership is actually how upsell is so many different things, right? We talk about upsell like one thing. And I like the framework you talked about of the different types of upsell. Maybe you can repeat that for folks.
Sure. I mean, my simplest framework is two types. There's other ones, but there's what I call incidental upsell, which is fries with your burger, right? Like it's not a difficult sales cycle. It's incremental. And what's in software, what's fries with your burger? It's upgrading an edition. It's selling more seats. It's doing a price increase, right? Those are all in effect fries with your burger upsells. That's one type. On the other extreme, you have whole sales cycle upsell. For example, at Host Analytics /Planfill, we had a planning module sold to the financial planning head, and we had a consolidation module sold to the consolidation head. Different buyer, different product. They'd typically be doing a full evaluation. I don't want to put a CSM in on what's effectively a new sale to a new buyer to an existing customer. So I would call that a full sales cycle, a non-incidental upsell. And the driving principle to me was to use the hunter-farmer cliche. Let's not put our farmers against their hunters, because it will end badly. Yeah.
that battle doesn't seem like a one you'd want to watch. So I like that. That's a great analogy. Yeah. Who are the salespeople on the other side of the deal from the competitors? That's great. Yeah. One of the questions that came in on LinkedIn was about, when in a company's life cycle, do you start looking at the profitability of customers as well? And when some customers might not just be not great net retention, but they're just not profitable at all. Did you ever deal with that in your past companies?
I got to think about that. I have not done a lot of customer profitability analysis, and I may be too literal in looking at it. I mean, look, there are definitely times where we said this customer is not worth keeping. And I never thought of it as profitability, to be honest, but it was. It
was more like you couldn't meet their needs, or you weren't a good fit for them, that type of thing, right?
We can't make them successful, and to make them, in effect, it is customer profitability, because to make them successful would cost too much professional services, too much engineering new features. So I think I've done it. I never really thought about it because as a business guy, when I think customer profitability, I think accounting project, lining it up, allocating costs, yada, yada. But I'll say kind of lowercase customer, lowercase profitability, watercolor. Yeah, I've done it. And I do think it's an important thing. And that's why I like the model where the CS is managing a cohort, because they can let that customer churn. And
that's so well said. And I think good CS people eventually develop that judgment. I mean, I love that. And I think where that, for the person asked that question, I think the answer probably varies a little bit based on the gross margin of the business. So if you have a business that has a lot of services costs and infrastructure costs associated with business, you may be thinking about profitability sooner rather than later. And if a lot of SaaS companies have very high margins, so frankly, most customers are all profitable in a nominal sense. But what I have seen is, like, if you have an infrastructure associated with your product, like using Amazon or whatever, there are customers that use it a lot more than others. And we have that in our business too, Dave, where it's like somebody has a ton of data, right? And they're like a small company, and your pricing model doesn't really charge that way. But the thing that's tricky is maybe they're a great advocate for you. And so maybe that one customer that's spending $50,000 a year is actually influencing $1 million in new sales. So that's why I find it challenging.
I agree. The other two things I'd say on that, when we think about customer profitability, there's kind of a gross profit perspective, like how much COGS are they eating up, right? Usage, data, blah, blah, blah. The place I tend to react first, given my background, is sales and marketing cost. And I would say that's, in most software companies, it's very hard to allocate sales and marketing costs by segment. So, it's easy to get NPS by segment. It's easy to get churn by segment. Sales and marketing costs by segment. I mean, if you want to do that analysis, you almost need to organize your company that way, because if you don't, it'll be virtually impossible.
Yeah, we actually tried to do that. All of our investors said, hey, it'd be great to look at, sales, marketing, unit economics by segment. And what we end up doing is just allocating everything proportional to revenue, which means that there's really nothing you're learning through that analysis. So the other question that came in, which I thought was a good one, was, we're talking about net retention, and obviously that's tied to, this renewal cycle with the customer. What about auto renewals? On one hand, they might improve your renewal rate. On the other hand, they might take away the ability to have a natural expansion conversation. You have a perspective on auto renewals?
So a couple things. I mean, first, just as a perfect segue off the last topic. I always like when the SaaS company has the right not to renew the customer. That's the contractual term.
The other side of it.
And it should be there. And in some ways it's not there. You don't say it explicitly, but you don't grant renewal as an automatic right, which gives you the ability to fire customers, right? See other conversation. Because you may be in a situation where you want to fire them as a customer, but the contract says you can't. So if we're going to think about auto renewals, we need to remember first that maybe we're the ones who want to get out, not them. First point. Second point, you do potentially lose you lose the ability to have the upsell conversation, which isn't great. I mean, I like multi-year deals, which, look, a multi-year deal is effectively an auto renewal, right?
Right, exactly. That's what it
auto renews in year 2 and year 3, and then we have a renewal conversation. So, I mean, in general, look, as a business person, the two things taught to me as I was young is hook pricing to something that goes up, right? This is the lessons from the software elders. In the old days, it was MIPS, literally, millions of instructions per second. Priced by the MIP was 1980s advice.
That's amazing.
And then the other one is make stuff automatically happen in your favor, right? So by default, so the perfect thing is auto renewing and auto expanding. Hey, why not?
That is amazing. Yeah, that's there's probably some of the big business out there. That's what they have effectively. The net retention, another good question from the audience. Net retention and customer lifetime value. Just think, the lifetime value typically doesn't include net retention in it. At least not the formulas I've seen. So how do the two of those relate to each other?
Sure. So net retention is first, it's a rate. So just technically speaking, it's how much every year somebody grows or shrinks. Lifetime value is a dollar figure. So there are different things. A typical lifetime value would be if Nick's worth $100 a year and his lifetime is 10 years, then he's worth $1,000. So you're outputting different units. The reason, I'm basically anti-lifetime value, and the reason I'm anti-lifetime value is I'm anti-lifetime, and the reason I'm anti-lifetime is that there's 4 different ways to calculate churn, and lifetime is 1 over churn, so there's 4 different lifetimes, and all of a sudden it just gets, this is the whole, that is the summary of my churn is dead, long-lived net retention. That's the whole talk, which is churn is basically meaningless. So, and by the way, there's a whole extra level of detail of what counts as churn and what doesn't. So if that argument doesn't convince you it's meaningless, we can talk for another hour about the next level. But I love the all-in nature of NDR because you can't game it. It's easy to calculate. There aren't 15 games you can play. I asked a really simple question. You take the cohort from a year ago, tell me what they're worth now. There's not a lot. The only wiggle room I know of is survivor bias. So
by the way, I totally agree with you. Now it's funny. I'm anti, even though this sounds bad, I'm anti lifetime and lifetime value too, for related reasons, which is I think that, lifetime value was really created in the consumer world. And I think it might make more sense there. There's some level of stability, especially pre-internet. There's some stability in purchasing and stuff like that. And so the two issues I see in lifetime value are, number one, you take 1 over churn and you say that's how long the lifetime is. And that just assumes that everything that's happening now is going to happen for 10 years. That's just crazy because your market is going to change so much in 10 years. So if your lifetime value, your lifetime is calculated as 2 years, fine, whatever. That's fine. That's probably a problem for you, but that's fine by me. But if your formula is spitting out 10 years, I get why that investment banker maxed out the sell.
Yeah.
Because it's crazy. 10 years from now, we'll be like replaced by AI. Like, are you sure your software is still going to be in use? The second thing is the value aspect of it, where I don't know what you've seen, Dave, but what I've seen in some of our clients is, churn rates aren't stable, right? So like, if you keep doing a great job, they can be stable, but over time they destabilize. And sometimes if you like don't mind the store, the retention rate can just kind of go off a cliff because there's a snowball of clients leaving. And so it's not like they gradually leave over time. It's like all of a sudden, gradually, and then all of a sudden. And so I think this whole lifetime value thing is very deceiving. So
agree. Two things. I almost did a blog post on this. It's in my 2 blog file, but I was going to do analysis. The lower the churn rate, the longer the lifetime. So the more of the higher the percentage of the notional lifetime value is in the distant future.
Yes.
Right. And in the distant future, to your point, what assumptions are not true? So that's my math problem with that one. The other one, just another math problem, is any formula that breaks in the desired state is not a good formula, because the desired state is in fact negative churn. Right. And negative churn means infinite lifetime. So if the whole thing falls apart in the state you want to be in, it's probably not a great framework for calculations.
There's some analogy here about equations of gravity and in a black hole. So if I want to connect this to physics, but we'll save that for another discussion sometime, because as some of you may know, a lot of physics breaks down in a black hole, and churn and lifetime value breaks down with positive net retention. So one of the things that's come up in the questions, and it's always something you and I have talked about, is what's product's role in net retention? So we talked about sales and customer success. What's product's responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think first, let me just think about it. I think it's a couple things. One, I would like the product people. I mean, this is a longer plug for my product clubhouse room tomorrow at 8 a.m.
Oh, yes. Awesome. So, I want to join one of those. That looked pretty interesting.
Yeah. So we do power breakfast every Thursday at 8 a.m. I wasn't planning on doing this, but it relates. We talk to product leaders about things. And one of the topics we'll hopefully hit tomorrow is the product leader as kind of GM versus PM. And I believe if you want to have a successful career in product, you need to think of yourself like a GM. And the GM is going to think about a business. They're not going to think about features, right? PMs can become feature myopic. GMs are business focused. So I think the first thing is you should, if you're in product and you're a product leader, we should be looking at our NDR, ideally by product. Hard to calculate, by the way. That's another whole session. But at least we should be thinking about what are we doing for the product. Say it's a one product company, NDR. And looking at life from that point of view. So the first thing, I think it's a point of view on the view of product. Second, obviously they need to be responsive to, in my mind, customer support and customer success, right? What is blowing people up on the launch pad? Because look, I don't know how much of churn these days is caused by inception, what I call inception churn, where literally it just blew up in the launch pad. Like either we sold a customer who was never going to be successful, or within the first 2 months they went off rails. And in my experience, that's actually a large percentage of churn. So what are we going to do to make sure we're selling people who are qualified for the product and who can be successful with the product? And if those people buy the product, then what are the things that are blowing them up before they really have a fair shot? So I think product needs to take a strategic view and just say, yes, this stuff meant, because by the way, there's a certain survivor bias in product. If we call together at the user conference all the people who've used the product for 5 years and ask them what they want, we're going to get precisely zero feedback on onboarding.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And I love that. And by the way, inception churn is such a great term. I've heard you use it before. And it's so true that that's something product has to own, because it's like what a lot of times customer success can't do anything at that point, right? It's dead on arrival. I love that. That's great. Okay, I'll close this out. First of all, the final question I have from the audience is hilariously, Cheryl Diamond wants a Kellogg fan club t-shirt. So I don't know if you have a merch store, but we may need to build a merch store with you at some point. Maybe we'll do that for Pulse. Yeah. And I'll do some. Yeah, exactly. We'll make it. I'll buy one of those t-shirts. I'm a fan. I'm going to close out with some word association, just so you see how you think in your great mind. So I'm going to throw out some words, and you have to say the first thing that comes to mind. So digital transformation.
Modernization.
Churn.
LTV. I hate it, but that's what
you hate it. Okay, churn. Yeah. You have a love-hate relationship. Yeah. NDR.
Growth.
Growth. And then customer success.
Business objectives. 2 words.
Business objective.
Yeah.
Awesome. Dave, so great to have you. I always have just a blast whenever I spend time with you. I know the audience did as well, and I'm sure we'll see you again on some virtual event soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick. Always a great time. We'll have to have you on one of my clubhouse rooms too. So.
I'd love to do that.
Love to have
super fun. Awesome, man. Okay, talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye. Bye, everyone.